In this tutorial you will learn why do we need the useReducer hook, the complete syntax in detail, the state inside the reducer function is read-only, why part of the state is undefined at some times, why useReducer returns old values, how to pass parameters to the reducer function, and finally how to create the initializer function. Make sure to watch every topic without skipping, so you can become a useReducer expert today. A component in React is said to be a single unit of operation that performs a single task. These components in our applications tend to increase their complexity based on functionality. We might need to use multiple state values and multiple operations on those values to achieve the complex functionality. This increases the number of methods and the variables in our component and reduces the clarity and readability. The useReducer hook is a good solution for such scenarios. It is pretty much similar to the useState hook. It moves the state changing logic from event handlers to a single reducer function as actions outside of the component. This increases the clarity and readability inside the components. Let's now see how we can use the useReducer hook inside our components. Don't worry too much about the syntax, we will talk about it in the next section. Every reducer must have a starting value. Let's create a variable named initial, const initial equals for the value 0. Let's define the reducer function, const reducer equals, this function takes in two arguments, the state, which is the up-to-date version of the initial value, then the action, which is invoked by the user. Inside the function body we have to define each and every action. Let's assume increment as one of our action. I will type if action equals increment, then we have to return something. We will return state plus 1 since it is increment. Let's do a bit of an error handling here. Throw error. We will type unknown action type. Now our initial value and the reducer function is ready. We can import the useReducer hook. For that I will type import useReducer from React. I will type useReducer. This reducer accepts two parameters. First is the reducer function which we have created, and next is the initial value. This will return an array with two values. First value is the state, we will call it number. Next value is dispatch, which is used to call the actions. Inside our JSX, let's type number. You can see the value is displayed. Let's create a button to increment the number using the dispatch method. Button, let's say increment in the onClick event. Let's use the dispatch method. As for its parameter, let's pass in the increment action. Save that. Let's click the button and see. You can see the number is being incremented. Suppose we wanted to extend the functionality of our component, then we have to update the reducer function. We'll copy this section, paste it in here. Else if action, I will call this one decrement. This time we have to subtract 1 and add another button. Let's go ahead and save that. Let's click the button and see. You can see with the reducer, adding functionality is pretty much easy and it gives you much cleaner code. To begin with, first we need to have an initial value. This value will be used as the reducer's starting state. This can be a simple variable, an array, or a complex object. Next we have the reducer function, which is the most important part of the useReducer hook. This can be considered as the heart of the reducer. We are using this function to calculate the next state value. This function is always declared outside of the component so that it would not get re-rendered every time. And this function should be a pure function, meaning the function should not depend on external values and it should always return the same output for the similar parameters. This function accepts two parameters. First is the state and the action is the other one. The state parameter represents the current state inside the reducer. As developers, we do not need to worry about it because React will pass that value for us. And always remember, it is a read-only value. Do not mutate it inside the actions. And the next parameter is the action. This is initiated by the user and it should be implemented inside the reducer function. To determine the action, we can make use of an if-else statement, but the switch case statement is much preferred among the community. An action should always return the next state value for us. There can be many actions inside the reducer function. And finally, you can add a bit of an error handling at the end of the useReducer function. We can define the action variable as a simple string or as an object in which we can pass the parameters with it. We have an entire dedicated section for passing parameters on this video. We will talk more about it then. Next, we have the import statement, which will allow you to use the useReducer hook inside your component. With this, now we can initiate a useReducer hook inside the component, which will accept two parameters, the reducer function and the initial value. This useReducer will return two values inside an array. The first value is the state, which holds the current value of the state. At the beginning, this is equal to the initial value we have defined. You can use this variable anywhere inside the component. And the next value is the dispatch method, which can be used to trigger the actions inside the reducer function. It accepts the action as the parameter. Action can simply be the name of the action or an object with the action name and parameters as payload, which will depend on how you have created the reducer function. The dispatch method can be called inside event handlers or any other function inside the component. Finally, we have the initializer function, which can be used to initialize the initial value of the reducer hook. This is completely optional parameter for the useReducer hook. For this also, we have an entire dedicated section. We will discuss in detail during that section about the initializer. Please take a quick moment to like the video so that it would get recommended for more audience. Subscribe to help us grow on YouTube. Turn on notifications to never miss a video on this channel. One thing about the reducer function state is that it is read-only, meaning you cannot mutate the value inside your actions. To illustrate this, I have a simple component which is having an object as the initial value, a reducer function, and a component named car, which is having a button, and the on-click event of that button is dispatching to a action named upshift. Let's go ahead and create that action inside the reducer function. I will type case upshift colon. Inside this, we need to increment the gear. I will type state.gear equals state.gear plus 1, and we need to return the state. Now let's click the button and see. You can see the gear is not incremented. That is because we have mutated the state here, and the state is read-only. The only thing you can do with the reducer function state is to read its properties but not updating it. To fix this, we can simply create a new state object with the existing state object's properties. To do that, we will type return, and we will use a spread operator to read the existing state values. And for our new object's gear property, we will type gear, and we will read the state's gear and add one. We will remove this one. In this line, we are not mutating the state but only reading it. Let's go ahead and save this. Let's now click the button and see. You can see it is updating fine. One of the issues that you might encounter with the useReducer hook is that part of your state becomes undefined after calling an action. To illustrate this, I will click this button. You can see only the gear count is incremented but the other state is missing. That is happening because we are not building the entire state object inside our action. When creating actions, do not forget to append all the state properties to your next state object. We can use a spread operator to do that. Save that. Let's refresh the page. Click the button again. You can see now the state is having all its properties. When working with useReducer hook, you might still get the old state value even after updating it with the dispatch method. To illustrate this, I have a simple component which is having a button, and the click event of that button is calling to a function which is having a dispatch method, and the dispatch action is returning a new state object with the gear count incremented, and we are logging that value to the console. You can see the current gear value is 0. We will click the button and see. You can see the gear has been incremented. Let's check the console. And inside the console, you can see the gear is 0, even if the gear is 1. Meaning we are getting the old state value instead of the updated one. The reason for this behavior is that useReducer is updating the state after the entire function has been executed. That is why in this console log, we are getting the old state value. In this example, let's see how we can pass a parameter to our reducer function section. To illustrate this, I have a button in my component and its label is drive, and I want to increase the number of miles by clicking it. To begin, let's create an object which will have two properties, type and the payload. Type is the name of the action and the payload is the data that we are going to pass to the action. For the payload's value, I will type 50, and inside of action for the miles, and let's take the value from the action's payload. Let's click the button and see. And that is how you pass data to your reducer function. The initializer function is the third argument of the useReducer hook. It is used to calculate the initial value of the useReducer. Let's now see how we can calculate the initial state value for the vehicle variable. We are expecting to calculate the average speed for the vehicle. To do that, we have a simple object named data which is having miles and hours as properties, and it is passed as the second parameter for the useReducer hook. Let's add the third parameter. I will type init vehicle. One thing to remember that it is the name of the function. Do not use parentheses in here. Let's now implement the function. When defining initializer function, the second parameter of the useReducer hook is becoming a parameter for the initializer function by default. Let's type params. And inside the function, we have to return a new object which will be stored as the vehicle state object. And inside that, speed params dot miles divided by params dot hours. Let's go ahead and save that. And inside the JSX, vehicle dot speed. Save that. You can see the value is calculated, which is coming from the initializer function. The initializer function is an optimization feature for the useReducer hook. It prevents from recreating the initial value of the useReducer. Also, implementation of this function is independent from the reducer function. That marks the end of this video, and I want to thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Check the links in the description for more detail. Stay safe until we meet on the next one.